and too severe. It's too lenient in that someone so powerful as a Spectre should not have been able or allowed to suffer these defeats. And yet at the same time, it's too severe because one single entity, even as powerful as the Spectre, could not be expected to be successful in either or both endeavors. So some really neat doublespeak on the part of the voice. And it's really this issue which marks a point of departure for the voice. The voice is not going to be a character that comes up in the rest of the Munch run on the Spectre. But the voice closes out its admonishment of the Spectre by saying that the Spectre is going to be given a new mission and a new relationship, if you will. The Spectre is being sent back to Earth, where its mission is going to be to confront and judge and punish evil. Also, the Spectre is going to be bound to a host. So that really confirms that during the Swamp Thing period, the voice had seen fit to remove or separate the Spectre and Jim Corrigan. And so the voice is making it sound like this is something new for Spectre to change, but really it's going back to an earlier time. For most of the Bronze Age, the Spectre's mission was to confront, judge, punish evil. And right up until the Swamp Thing period, the Spectre was bound to a host, Jim Corrigan. So on to the other concurrent storyline. We're introduced to a young administrative assistant named Kim Liang, and she up and quits her job, just walks out and says, "I'm tired of this, I can't take it, I'm gone." And everybody's shocked. And Kim finds herself walking in anger, and she comes across a brownstone, a large building, and she enters the main office and she meets resident DCU magic user Madame Xanadu, who says, "Welcome to my office. I'm Madame Xanadu. I can tell that you're troubled. I have a job for you. Here's a piece of paper. It has a storage locker number. You're going to go to this address, have the locker open, and you're going to take the item out of the storage locker." And so Kim does that, but when the locker is open, she finds that the only thing inside the locker is this giant stone urn, and there's no way she can carry it, so she recruits two guys to load the urn up onto a truck and take it back to Madame Xanadu's office. And after doing so, Xanadu says, "Oh, excellent. I didn't tell you to bring the urn back here, but you did. This is good." And this is where the two storylines converge. The urn is knocked over, cracks open, and we see the recently deceased body of Jim Corrigan. At the same time, the Spectre comes crashing through the ceiling, and he ends up entering Jim Corrigan's body. And Xanadu finishes the task of binding the Spectre to Jim Corrigan. And Corrigan awakes. And he says, "My God, I'm alive again. What happened? How am I here?" He gets to his feet, and Xanadu introduces herself and Kim Liang and says, "Hold, there's more." And the Spectre exits Jim Corrigan's body. It's not like how it was in the Silver Age. Jim Corrigan doubles over in pain. He's in excruciating pain, in fact, as the Spectre exits Corrigan's body. And Xanadu explains that they have been bound once more, but this time there's a change. It's going to be painful in the beginning for Jim Corrigan, but the more the Spectre exits and re-enters Corrigan's body, the greater the tolerance he'll have for this, and so after a time it's not going to hurt anymore. But Munch, through Xanadu, adds another element to what's essentially a Silver Age concept of the Spectre separating from Jim Corrigan. Xanadu explains that there is a 24-hour rule. After 24 hours, the Spectre needs to return to Jim Corrigan's body. The longer he spends away from Corrigan's body, past 24 hours, the weaker he will get. And Corrigan will also start to experience discomfort. If it reaches 48 hours, both the Spectre and Jim Corrigan will die or cease to exist. And Xanadu comments that the Spectre has been largely depowered, but he is still an immensely powerful force. And so now the Spectre has the freedom to go about his mission of confronting, judging, punishing evil. And Xanadu explains to Corrigan that she's actually set up a private office for Corrigan 5 floors above her in the same building. And she has somehow managed to secure a private investigator's license for him. So even though Corrigan had, up until some time ago, been working at the NYPD, he's now going to come up with the cover story that he's decided to leave the force and that he's working on his own. And of course, given that Madame Xanadu has set this all up, you've got to know that in time, Jim Corrigan's investigations are going to be more of the supernatural investigations type of work. It's going to be a Spectre who's going to be the one to go after the traditional human villains. Xanadu also says that Corrigan is going to need an assistant, and he's got an assistant right there. Xanadu says, well, here you go, Miss Liang. You lost your job today. Here's a new job. You're Mr. Corrigan's assistant now, which Kim readily agrees to, and Corrigan doesn't seem to have too much of a problem with it. In fact, what's really striking from the start of this new volume of the Spectre is that Corrigan doesn't really come across as the hard-boiled detective type. And he certainly doesn't sound like a person who's from an earlier time. And I think this probably comes from editorial oversight. I do think that Munch was made aware of the fact that during this immediate post-crisis period, the focus was on the here and now. And yes, it did come at the expense of the Golden Age characters, but there was this expectation that there wouldn't be so many references, if any at all, to Jim Corrigan and the Spectre in the 40s. So Doug Munch presents Jim Corrigan as somebody who really changed with the times. And he's really lost that hard-boiled edge. He's by no means a sweetheart. He's not even a very likable person, as we'll find out in these first few issues. But he does sound like somebody who's in his late 30s. So we're talking, story came out in 1987. So Jim Corrigan here sounds like somebody who was born physically 30 years ago and speaks like a 30-something-year-old. Also, it's interesting to know the change in his appearance. He's still got the streak of white hair in his otherwise full head of red hair, but he's not wearing the traditional suit and tie. He'll wear it once or twice later on in the run, but he's really switching more to polo sweaters, certainly 80s fashions. Even his hairstyle looks more like a hairstyle of the time. So there's nothing really ghostly looking about Jim Corrigan. In fact, it's Munch who starts a tradition of Corrigan referring to the Spectre as Moonface, which I'm sure the Spectre does not approve of. In fact, within the first few issues, we do get some insight as to this relationship between Jim Corrigan and the Spectre, as they're actually sitting down to play a game of chess. And Corrigan at one point says, okay, so let me get this straight. I'm the body, it's my brain, but Spectre, you're my soul. And the Spectre says, yes, I am imprinted on your soul. And this is a pretty big revelation here. And probably for some fans, it really confirms their belief that Jim Corrigan wasn't entirely the Spectre. Rather, Jim Corrigan was imbued with some power, but there was something more to it than just having these powers placed inside him. There's actually something else going on inside in the Corrigan-Spectre relationship. And this certainly takes us a pretty significant step closer towards the Ostrander-Mandrake reveal in the third volume of the Spectre, that there is this separate entity that is the Spectre that is bound to Jim Corrigan's soul. So a very important piece of information there, certainly throwing a bone towards future writers such as Ostrander and Mandrake. And so in the first few issues, Corrigan settles into his work as a private eye. Major ongoing point of conflict for Jim is the cult of the Blood Red Moon. They are the major antagonists throughout the first half of the run. And eventually Jim Corrigan and the Spectre will have to come face to face with the cult of the Blood Red Moon. But there's one other very significant conflict which Jim Corrigan experiences. It's actually his conflict with the Spectre, and I'm going to talk all about that, as well as the entirety of the Doug Munch run on the Spectre during the Copper Age. That will come in part 2 of episode number 123, which will come your way in 2 weeks from now. If you want to get in touch with me, in the meantime, you can email me at comicsandhistory@gmail.com, or you can go on over to the Facebook page for Comics and History, like the page so you get regular updates on upcoming episodes of the show. And by the way, thanks to Professor Allen and to Jason and to Mike Myers, who recently got in touch with me as well to congratulate me about the impending birth of my next little one. I'm really going to miss being able to podcast as much as I have been for the bulk of these past 4 years. But there's still more coming your way, and I am working really hard to make sure that there will be at least 2 or 3 episodes coming out during my hiatus to keep you folks entertained until the time that I'm ready to go back to at least part-time, if not full-time podcasting. So folks, until another 14 days have come and gone, let's consider this class to be in recess.